Hi everybody, I'm Dawn. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for visiting with me today. You see I have my notebook. That means we're going to be talking about something serious. And yeah, this is a serious video. I'm going to be referring to my notes a lot because I wrote everything out in my words, but you know, if you've been following my channel for any amount of time, you know this noggin doesn't work. But I haven't talked about this case on my channel yet, just because it's especially bothersome to me, but because of the kind of like parallels to the Ruby Frankie case, I thought, let's talk about it because we need to quit sweeping it under the rug. CA, a word I can't say on here because YouTube doesn't like it. There are so many words you can't say on YouTube, and like the R word. You can't say what CA is. You can't say what SA is. You can't say EDs. And I think it's wrong. I think, I love YouTube as a platform. I love it very much. I think it's a great platform. Honestly, I do believe that. But the rules about certain words that you can't say, it's really aggravating to me because these are topics. They exist whether we're allowed to say the word or not. And people want to share their stories. People want to talk about these things, not for entertainment, but because these are important topics that need to be discussed. And YouTube just wants us, it just seems like YouTube wants us to sweep it all under the rug, and just because we can't say the words doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It still exists. It still happens. And we should be able to talk about it freely on YouTube. And they say it's not advertiser friendly. Well, news programs use these words and they have advertisers. So what's the difference really? It's just something I really disagree with YouTube on. I think we should be able to speak freely about what's in the news and what we're experiencing and, events, things that happen. We should be able to talk about these and name them. We should be able to name them. We should be able to look at a bad guy and call him what he is. And we should be able to do that on YouTube, on our own channels. And that's just one thing I have a real problem with. So, but we're going to talk about this case today. It's the Shanda Vander Ark case. So I'm just going to go over my notes. I'm pretty sure everyone knows what's going on. I'm sorry I say a lot, but that's because we're talking like friends. We're not, I'm not a news channel. I never claimed to be. But I just want to talk about this case. So Shanda Vander Ark was found guilty in December of TORTURING and starving her 15-year-old son, Timothy Ferguson, to DEATH. I have to be careful with these words. When his body was found in July 2022, he weighed 69 pounds. The average weight of a healthy 15-year-old boy is between 123 and 130 pounds, according to the CDC. When first responders saw Timothy's body, they thought he was more like 8 years old because he was so tiny. And I don't know if at this point they could see how skinny he was, because I don't know if he had the oversized clothes on that she had him wear sometimes. But he was so skinny and frail looking. So I guess maybe they did see him. I don't know. But they knew something had been going on for months that led to this moment. And so Timothy was living in Norton Shores, Michigan. His parents are Shanda Vander Ark and Eric Ferguson. He lived with his mother, his older brother Paul, and a younger brother who we're not going to name. Paul was 19 years old at the time of Timothy's unaliving, and his younger brother was 7. And Timothy had other siblings that he did not live with. And we're going to hear from them a little later in the video. And Timothy had autism and was homeschooled. And God, if he wasn't homeschooled, maybe he would have been saved. But who knows? Who knows? It feels like society only cares about children once they're gone. But so Shanda was investigated by CPS between 2009 and 2012 And because of the results of that investigation, she relinquished her custody of the children to her ex-husband. Otherwise, she was going to be stripped of her parental rights by CPS. That's what they told her. And her ex-husband, Eric Ferguson, that's his name. So Eric took custody of Paul, Timothy, Millie, and Nolan. And she had to pay child support. I think it was $1,000 a month. And she had 3 hours of supervised visitation per month. I'm not sure what happened that led to this. I tried to find stuff about it and I couldn't. If you know, or if you've found information about it, let me know. I'd be interested in knowing about that. In May of 2021, Eric Ferguson allegedly told Shanda that he could not keep up with Timothy's care. So Timothy moved back in with her. And I'm not sure why CPS didn't get involved again. I mean, if at one point they threatened to terminate her parental rights, you'd think they'd get involved now. So, but I guess if no one tells them, they don't know. It just really would have been better if his dad, Eric Ferguson, would have just called CPS. He signed that kid's death warrant, pretty much. Death certificate. I think a death warrant is different. So in January of 2022, Shanda's husband, Adam, had a stroke and he moved to Florida to his parents' home so he could receive appropriate care. Now, I was thinking, what if he didn't move? What if he stayed there and Shanda took care of him? Would she have ABUSED her husband? Because he was in need. He was, needed help. But that's neither here nor there. We won't know that. But I bet she would have. But the changes affected Timothy profoundly. But Shanda did not have any empathy for him. She's just a cold, bitter woman. You could tell by looking at her. There is nothing there but coldness. She is just a cold, ugly, awful person. So, on July 6, 2022, when first responders found Timothy, they called the police, and Shanda told the police that Timothy became unresponsive after he fell from a bunk bed. But medical examiners proved that was a lie and ruled Timothy's death a homicide, and the cause of death was a combination of malnourishment and hypothermia. Yeah, hypothermia in July. The police found a ton of evidence, including video footage and text messages between Shanda and her 19-year-old son, Paul, basically discussing the treatment of Timothy. Now, so when first responders arrived, and police were looking around for evidence, there was tons of evidence. Now, Shanda allegedly is an extremely educated woman. She went to law school. She passed the bar exam. She should be pretty smart. And it didn't even occur to her to try and clean up some of the evidence, try and get rid of the cameras and stuff. None of this occurred to her. She had to know they were caught. She had to know, well, we're caught. We're going to prison. We've been found out. But it doesn't seem like she really thought that. I don't know what her thought process was, but I'm not advising anyone to cover up crimes, but I'm just saying, she did this to him. She knew she did this to him, and she didn't try to even hide what she did. And the room Timothy had was a closet under the stairs. I believe it was under the basement stairs, that had a blue tarp and a cardboard box, nothing else. There was no bed. There was no pillows. There were no blankets. There were no comfort items at all. It wasn't fit for a dog to live in. My dog gets a fluffy pillow, and, I don't like it when people say something isn't fit for a dog, because I think dogs should be treated like royalty, but that's not for this video. So Timothy was tormented by Shanda and his older brother, Paul. And this reminds me so much of a young man that lived in a group home my sister used to work at a long time ago, way back in the 80s. I think I was like maybe 13 or 14 years old. And one of the residents, he was young. He was probably in his early 20s. and he was environmentally, mentally impaired, mentally. I can't remember what he was, but he, before he came to live there, his parents kept him in a closet under the stairs and threw his food to him and stuff. And it was so sad. And I remember when I was like 13, 14 years old and she was telling me about this, I was heartbroken. And that story about him just stayed with me forever. It stayed with me since then. Just so horrific. It's so horrific what people do to their children. And it's such a gift to have children. Marshall is my whole world. And I'm not saying that other people don't love their children as much as I love Marshall, but I can't understand why anybody could hurt their children, their own flesh and blood, because I adore Marshall. He is my everything. Without Marshall, I have nothing, you know? So when a mom is so cold and just so disgusted like she is, I just can't understand what drives someone to be that way. And this story just breaks my heart. It really does. I'm trying to hold it together. So there was video footage of her covering his mouth shut, like covering it shut, while his breathing was already slowing down. He was struggling breathing. She covered his mouth shut and berated him for struggling to breathe until he took his last breath. And she didn't care. This female thing didn't care at all. But it was recorded on camera, on the security cameras. They have video footage of it. And Paul claimed the reason they didn't call 911 right away is because he was trying to resuscitate him. But that, interestingly enough, was not caught on video. And Paul told authorities the reason Timothy was so underweight was because he was on a hunger strike. But later admitted that that was a lie. Yeah. They pretty much figured out that was a lie, but he admitted that it was. And Shanda ordered Paul to punish Timothy. She would order him to dole out punishment to Timothy. He was forced to throw up food that he ate without permission. So he had to throw it up, and that's just disgusting. And she forced Timothy to eat Carolina Reaper hot sauce, both on bread, and she would also dump it down his throat. She made him take hours-long ice baths. In fact, this day, he had taken an 8-hour ice bath just prior to his unaliving. He was deprived of sleep. The refusal of medical care. She didn't take him to the doctor for the time he was living with her, and discontinued his medication. And that's a type of ABUSC. Running stairs and doing wall sits and forcing him to go faster running the stairs and faster, and just systematic, consistent, unrelenting torture. And Paul Ferguson testified against his mother in court, detailing the ABUSC and how he was directed to do various things, including policing Timothy using the bathroom. He had 1 minute to urinate and 2 minutes for the other. I don't know about him, but I take time in the bathroom. So that is, to me, that's cruel. Of any moment in your life, that should be private. That should be your private time, honestly. And he was directed to do various other things, giving him bread with hot sauce, forcing him to do the wall sits, giving him the ice baths, and hours-long ice baths, not just the ones you see these health gurus do where they just get in the ice bath and then get out. Hours-long ice baths. And he was also restrained with zip ties and shackles. And Shanda even told Paul to put hot sauce on Timothy's genitals. Not to touch the genitals, just dump some hot sauce on it and see what happened. But he refused to do that. What a guy, huh? What a hero. Yay, Paul. And I know people right now are probably thinking, well, give Paul a break. He was a 19-year-old kid who's probably scared of his mom. No, there's more. And you're going to hear from the judge, too. And Shanda claims she suffered from disassociation from PTSD since her husband's stroke. Since her husband Adam's stroke. And that holds absolutely no water as far as I'm concerned. She consciously sent her son Paul text messages directing him to torture Timothy with specific ways to do it. In other words, she's a liar. She's blaming stress and PTSD and near blackouts and being tired. She was so exhausted. Feel sorry for me because I'm so exhausted. I mean, when Marshall was going through cancer treatment, I was tired. I didn't sleep. Eric didn't sleep. This was a hard time in our life, but we certainly did not take it out on our child. So she force-fed him super hot sauce, claiming he loved spicy food. He loved spicy food. But she knew what she was doing. That was BS that he loved spicy food. She purposely forced Carolina Reaper sauce down that child's throat as punishment simply because he existed. And she told him, you should be thanking me for being your mother and apologizing and stuff like that. And she talks in court about how she was barely functioning. She was exhausted and stressed. We'll let them finish barking. If that was true, which I don't believe, but if that was true, if she was so tired and stressed that she couldn't properly care for her special needs child, she should have called someone. She should have called CPS. And the utter nerve of this horrific monster, this beast, this evil, evil cow, when they showed her pictures of Timothy's emaciated and tortured body, she had the nerve to act like she was vomiting and crying, and the nerve of her. But she knew what he looked like. She was there. She was there holding her hand over his mouth, killing him. She was there. She knew what he looked like. She knew exactly what he looked like. God, she's evil. But she put on a good performance, though. Not good enough for the jury, but it didn't work, But she didn't have that reaction because of the pictures of Timothy. She reacted like that because she knows those photos were nails in her coffin, or she knew they were nails in her coffin. The trial was very short, lasting only 2 days. The jury deliberated for 1 hour. And Shanda was not present for the verdict because of her medical issues. We're supposed to feel sorry for her. I'm so sad for her. But Shanda was found guilty of all charges against her, and this was on December 15th, 2023. Close to Christmas, when Timothy should have been having fun and enjoying time with his family. But instead, members of his family unalived him by starving him and torturing him. Shanda's sentencing was on Tuesday, January 23rd. And before sentencing, Timothy's siblings gave impact statements, and I have included them here.
I'm Millie. I'm Timothy's youngest older sister. I'm 2 years older than him. One of my earliest memories I have was being taken away from my parents by CPS. My 2 older brothers rode in a car ahead of us, and me and Timothy rode together in the second car. And in every picture we have as a family, Timothy was always right by my side. We were the 2 youngest, the 2 smallest. We were the 2 that sat in the middle in the backseat car rides with the 2 small car. The last 2 to get hand-me-downs, the 2 that never had to worry about not getting homework help from an older sibling. He was always 2 years behind me, so every time I got to the next level in school, that's how many years I had to wait for him to follow along. When I was in 8th grade, he was in 6th, and there was a student in my science class that started talking about him, trying to start rumors. I stood up right as class was starting, as people were quieting down, and I shouted at him to never talk about my little brother. People could say whatever they wanted about me, I didn't care, but not about him, and never about him, because I was his big sister. It was my job to protect him. I like to say I don't regret things in my life, that every mistake I've made has made me who I am today, but when Timothy died, I couldn't stop regretting. I regret not hugging him more and teasing him so much instead of telling him that I loved him every once in a while. I regret not putting aside my differences with Shanda and Paul just to check in on him. I regret not dancing with him the last time I saw him at our brother's wedding. These are the things that I can't remedy now. There's no fixing what's been done. No way to redo it all over again, and that's my regret. that I couldn't protect him when he needed me most. Timothy was so smart. He could take anything apart with any tools, or none at all. He had trouble focusing, but when he did, he was just as smart as the rest of his class. He made people angry, yes, but then he would look at you with those big baby blue eyes and you could never stay mad at him. It took me 6 months of therapy after he died to even properly feel the emotions of his death. And I'm still in therapy today. I've been trying so hard since he passed away just to try to let people know of him, let people know that he was loved, that there are people out there grieving for him. I'm here today for him because I was asked to speak for him, because I was given a victim impact statement for him instead of a witness one, because the victim of this crime can't speak for himself. I knew him his whole life. I held him the day he was born, and I continued to try to hold his hand as long as he was by my side, until he wasn't. I want the woman who killed my little brother to face the highest punishment possible. I want her detained for the rest of her life so she can't hurt anyone else. And I want the world to know that Timothy was wanted, if not by her, then by me.
Timothy's oldest brother, and unfortunately the oldest child of Shanda Vander Ark. I live with my wife 900 miles from here, and in July of 2022 I was working 60-hour work weeks, trying to build a career when I received a phone call that I never thought I would get. My baby brother Timothy was gone. For 2 days I reeled with no explanation, until I was informed that our own mother was in jail for his murder. Somehow, making an entirely unexpected and deeply awful situation worse. I thought that things were different than when I was younger. I thought my mother had changed for the better. Not one day has been easier since then. I've had to leave my career behind. My wife has to watch helplessly as I struggle, day in and day out, wondering how none of us knew what was going on, wondering if I told Tim I loved him enough times for him to remember, up until the very end. I have to wake up every day and pretend that I am who I was before Timothy died. I have to pretend to be Nolan so that my friends and coworkers and family won't worry about me more than they already do. I'm surrounded by people who love me and care about me, but not a single person besides my sisters who understand how hard it is. Timothy wasn't surrounded by people who loved him when he died, and if I had known that, nothing could have stopped me from rescuing him and holding him in my arms and telling him I love him, that his big brothers got him, just like I did the day he was born. But because of Shanda Vander Ark's actions, I instead got to cradle the bag of his ashes in my arms, just like I did the day he was born. In all my life, I only knew one thing that my little brother didn't like. He hated goodbyes. If he had to say goodbye to anyone, he would cry, and he would hold you, and he would say, "Don't go." But now I'm the one crying, but I never got to say goodbye. I will always love Timothy like I always have, and it kills me to think about him. But I know he loved even his abuser and killer up until the very end, because unlike me, that's all he was capable of, love. I, on the contrary, want to stand here and express the anger and hatred that I feel, but if I'm honest, all that's just a mask, a bandage I try to put over the hole in my heart that was reserved for Timothy, but is now just filled with pain and remorse for every hug, high five, and I loved you that I might have missed in the time that I had with my sweet baby brother. So now I turn to the justice system in hopes that in addition to serving the maximum penalty, that there will be no appeals or second chances. If I can't have my brother back, she shouldn't have her freedom back. And lastly, I want everyone to know that to those who knew him, even that wouldn't feel like justice. Because the life of one sweet little blue-eyed boy is not equivalent to that of a murderer.
And next, the prosecutor spoke, and he pulled no punches. And I'm going to include that here.
I wanted to stand here for two reasons. I wanted to stand here, up here at this podium, next to Millie and next to Nolan as they gave their statements, for two reasons. One, to show that we support them, that we support whatever statement they wanted to make here today. But I also wanted to see Ms. Vander Ark. She didn't look over her kids once. Not once during this entire process. did she look over at her children. And that speaks volumes, because this case has always struck me that it's impossible as a parent, let alone as a human being, to understand the depths of the depravity that it took for us to come here today. All of the things that she did, or all of the things that she withheld, or all of the things that she directed her other son to do, are so callous and so cold that they just defy explanation. And I convinced myself that the only thing that could make any sense is that on some level, she had stopped thinking of her children as human beings. And frankly, her not looking over and not even wanted to express some type of emotion or some type of remorse or some type of recognition of those two older children that she had a hand in raising and who spoke so eloquently and so beautifully and so passionately here today, just reflects what I guess we already feared and already knew about Ms. Vander Ark. By a long margin, this case has been the most difficult case that I've ever worked on as prosecutor. There are a few people that have had any contact with this that wouldn't say the same thing. Whether it's police officers, whether it's the first responders, whether it's the paramedics or the firefighters who were on the scene, who all needed counseling to get through it. To the prosecutors that have looked at this, to the other attorneys that have looked at this, to anyone you talk to, nobody can look at this and understand any of this. And certainly nothing in Ms. Vander Ark's testimony, we know it wasn't persuasive for the jury, and nothing in her testimony can provide any real insight into what was going on here. Again, other than what I feel is the conclusion here is that her children were just not people to her, that she just stopped thinking of them as that. They were, certainly Timothy was just an obstacle to her. He was a challenge that she was going to win. She was not going to let Timothy win. And she said it over and over again in the text messages. And it's just unfathomable.
And then her lawyer spoke, and I'm not going to beat him up. He's doing his job. It's a right to have legal defense, but I'm not going to feel sorry for her. But here he is.
In my client's case, Judge, as you've read the pre-sentence and the people have read it and it's been admitted, her biological father, my client's biological father, died when she was 8 years old. And he also sexually and physically abused her, which means he began before she turned 8. And as the court is aware, we don't catch these guys the first time, and especially when force and violence is used, they can hide their transgressions for years. Once this man is out of her life, another man comes into her life, her stepfather, who does the same thing until she's old enough to move out of the house. The court is also aware that my client has also had the burden of mental health issues. And quite frankly, the reality is when people are conditioned to believe that that's the sort of treatment that they deserve by their father and their stepfather, and their mother's not going to protect them, they tend to seek out that sort of abuse in the spouses. So the abuse continues all through the youth of her life until she finally frees herself with this man. And what does she do when she frees herself? She puts without resources, she has no wealth. Without resources, she puts herself through college. She puts herself through law school. She not just puts herself through, she's second in her class in college, and she's second in her class in law school. And she has, 8 books from school, which she's, jokingly told us twice when her stepfather had. They talked about things. She goes on and she provides a home for her 3 children and her ailing husband while going to school full time, while being a mother full time, while working full time. She does all these things. But she makes a mistake. She makes one decision she shouldn't have made. She says yes. She has no criminal history. I couldn't find a speeding ticket. She She raised dogs. She did Herculean stuff. When she got that phone call telling her that Timothy is either going to come to her or he was going to go into foster care, she says yes. Had she said no, I already have a house full of people I can't afford. We don't have the resources. Had she said no, my husband's sick. I have a 20-year-old son who's still living off us, sleeping on the couch. Had she said no, Timothy would be alive today. And he would probably be in the loving care of a foster family, probably someone who could take care of kids with special needs. Had she said no, with her academic backgrounds, and quite frankly, given the fact of she has a relative in the legal profession who's highly regarded in the profession, she would now be practicing law and probably be doing very well at it, given her academic abilities. But she didn't say no. She did what moms do. She said, that's my boy, my baby. I'm taking him home, and I'm bringing him into the house. She brought him in knowing that she shouldn't have him there because she doesn't have custody. She brought him in knowing that she couldn't get him into schools and get him into because he didn't have custody. Her ex-husband was not going to assist her in that. She brought him in knowing she wasn't going to get any more financial assistance. It wasn't her intention for us to be here. It was never her intention.
And I want to talk about one part where he says she did what moms do. Moms don't torture and starve their children. They provide unconditional love. They feed their children. They nourish their children mentally and physically, and give them, help them get an education. They raise their children. They take care of them. They love them. They love their children. And I'm not talking about giving them material possessions and things. Just a mother loves her children. This was not a mother. This was a monster. This was a beast. She didn't love her children. How dare anyone call her a mom or a mother? She's not worthy of that word. We should be allowed to strip that title away, formally strip that title away from women like this. We absolutely should be able to do that. I mean, this woman makes my mom look like Mother Teresa. Seriously. Okay, so, and then the judge spoke, and I think what he said was pretty powerful, and so this is the judge.
You know, Mr. Johnson makes the same argument today that he made at the trial, that this was just negligence. This was her not understanding what was going on. She was really trying to do the punishment. She was trying to be a good parent, and she just didn't realize that Timothy was in such a horrible condition. And I found myself, especially during closing argument, quite frankly, finding myself almost believing that. And afterwards, after the trial, I sat in my car after leaving that day, trying to understand, why I could feel that way. And what I realized is that I wanted to feel that way because I didn't want to accept the reality of the situation here. And the reality of the situation here is that this person, Ms. Vander Ark, you intentionally engaged in these acts. This wasn't negligence. This is not understanding why, but you intentionally did this with a goal. And I think Mr. Johnson's correct. I don't believe there was an intent to kill here, because you would have lost the very thing that you wanted to torture. Without him, you have no one to torture, except maybe the younger children. So I don't believe you intended to kill him. I think you intended to continue on torturing him for as long as you possibly could. The why, I don't know. But all the information that I have in front of me, and I sat down, I really thought about this, and I looked over my notes from the trial, demonstrate that this wasn't negligence. This wasn't you not understanding what was going on. You look through, I read through every single text message of the exhibit, 2,000 plus pages, to try to understand what the heck was going through your mind. And what became entirely clear to me is that you knew exactly what you were doing. Immediately afterwards, when police arrive at the home, you immediately concoct this lie about he's been on a hunger strike. He was in the bed and I checked on him and I gave him some food and all this stuff. You got Paul involved in it. At one point in time, put baggy clothes on him. Put clothes on him to make sure, I guess, that he looks like he was actually wearing them, that he was hiding his poor condition, even though you already received text messages, weeks earlier of how bad he looked. You testified yourself how highly intelligent you were. In fact, that's the only thing that you testified to that I think was actually true. You were quite proud of that, boasting how intelligent you were. And not only that, but your actions in hiding this child. You hid him from his grandparents. You made sure that your other son, G, or little man as you call him, didn't see him. Those text messages talk about not wanting anyone to see him. I want to see him in that condition. You made sure that the garage was closed. When you sent him out there with no pants on to clean out the garage. I don't want to believe it because I don't understand. I can't wrap my mind. I've been trying now for this entire case to wrap my mind about how somebody could do something so horrific, not only to another human being, but to their own child. I'm a father myself. I love my kids. I love them with unconditionally. But quite frankly, there's a mother's love that I've seen that is striking. And anybody who's a parent who's married, most mothers, not all, but most mothers have such a strong love for their children. And to see what you did to your own child, I don't know if there's a word in the English language to describe how to describe it. The only thing I can come up with is just horrific. You intentionally and systematically tortured this child. And let's call it what it is. It's torture. You tortured this child. This wasn't punishment. This wasn't trying to curb his behavior. You tortured him. I didn't allow pictures to be shown in open court of Timothy as he was when he died because I didn't want people to remember him like that. Of all the things you took away from him, one thing I didn't want you to take away from him was at least some shred of dignity. And then I also thought, well, I'm a judge. I'm a human being. I don't know how to right this wrong. We try to do that. I try to do that from the bench every day. There's no way to right this wrong except impose the sentence that essentially takes away your freedom. And I thought to myself, what do I do? And I will tell you this. I'm choosing not to remember your son dead, looking like a Holocaust victim, but I'm choosing to remember like that. And you can't even look at him. That's how he was. A beautiful child with a lot of life in his eyes. That's who your son was. And you took that from him. I'm choosing to remember him as a happy individual with life, not as an individual. And that's the picture I want people to remember of your son. You took that from him. You took it from him. For what reason, I don't know. Mr. Johnson's right. There is something broken in you. I don't know what that is, but it doesn't negate what you did here.
And she did want Timothy to stay alive. I agree with the judge on that because she got off on torturing him, and had she not been arrested, if she had found a way to cover up Timothy's death or whatever, she would have eventually moved on to the younger child. I believe that. because monsters like this don't stop. They do not stop. She's a demon. She gets off on hurting people, and it was going to go on. And even Paul was very skinny. He looked very emaciated in the cheeks and stuff, but he was 19. He worked, and he could have taken care of himself, really. But she is someone that gets off on hurting people weaker than her, or people she can lord power over. Now, Paul Ferguson pled guilty in December to first-degree CA, and he was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years and a maximum of 100 years. But it was 30 years. I don't know why I wrote the maximum of 100 years. He was sentenced to 30 years. I think what I meant was the maximum was 100, but he got 30. And the look on his face. Now, I know, again, people think I may feel sorry for him, but just listen to what the judge has to say.
Maybe the court could accept that. But we have an individual who was in a household for 6 months, intentionally himself engaging in torture of another person. And he well, I'm worried about my mom's gonna say. Clearly it's not borne out in these reports. He had the ability to disobey his mom. In fact, he was on the stand and almost boasted that, well, I gave him extra food. Well, weren't you worried about how your mom was gonna be upset? I still gave him extra food. So what that tells me is that this has been a careful, manipulated story by Mr. Ferguson from the very beginning of this thing, that he's going to put the blame on his mom. I'm going to be manipulated. I have Asperger's syndrome. I have autism. I have Stockholm syndrome. There's mention of him saying, well, maybe I have Stockholm syndrome in here. No, this is an individual. What the truth of this is that we have two individuals that lack empathy, who lack emotion, and both of them, the triggering factor in this report, the triggering factor that caused this abuse was the removal of the husband, of stepdad. Once he was gone, these two individuals were free to torture somebody, and they did it. That's what they did. And I think Ms. Vander Ark did use Mr. Ferguson. I think that she knew from his history that he was predisposed to torment Timothy. I think that she knew that he would have no problem doing that. And Mr. Ferguson walked through that door and was happy to be the enforcer, was happy to do it, and continued to torture his brother over and over and over and over until he was a shell of a person, until he was dead. Died from starvation, died from hypothermia. He had no fat on him, barely any muscle on him. And the whole time, just letting it happen. The report says it appears that the stepfather's presence in the home had prevented Paul and his mother from abusing the victim. Again, it wasn't anything to do, they were just holding him back, essentially. The overall opinion, which I think is important, is, in my opinion, although the defendant's participation in the abuse was in a part a function of his social milieu and living situation, these contextual factors were not a necessary condition for his participation. As previously noted, mental health records contain information to the effect that while they were still living with their father and stepmother and reportedly had no contact with their mother, Mr. Ferguson's stepmother told the psychiatrist that he has become bossy, telling his sibling what to do, and the defendant himself that he would become irritable due to his younger siblings not listening. He gets physically aggressive, told his younger sibling. He also reports that he's gotten irritated with his siblings and has pushed them in retaliation. He's also tried to lock his younger brother, the decedent, in the closet because his brothers wouldn't listen to him. Consistent with this, Norton Shores Police Department documents indicate that Mr. Ferguson's stepsister told police that, quote, he is the biggest bully she's ever met in her life, and he found genuine joy in tormenting Timothy whenever possible when they were living in the biological father's home. Notably, the defendant allegedly engaged in this abusive behavior despite there being any safety rules in place, and despite his father and stepmother disapproving of this behavior to such an extent that they removed him from their home once he turned 18 because of it. In my opinion, Paul Ferguson was predisposed to abuse his brother independent of his mother's present and active influence in his life. Nonetheless, in my opinion, Mr. Ferguson's involvement in repeated acts of abuse that amounted to physical and psychological torture over a period of months reflects a general lack of empathy for his brother and a lack of remorse for his actions. It concludes that, in my opinion, there is no reason to believe that Mr. Ferguson's conduct disorder has remitted or that his participation in the abuse of his brother was not an expression of a persistent pattern of antisocial conduct. The court is concerned that Mr. Ferguson will not get the help he needs in prison. I think he's one step away from becoming a psychopath like his mother. And the court is concerned that he represents a danger to the public. That if released, he would represent a significant danger to the public. The charge here is child abuse. And I don't think this charge or the sentencing guidelines take into adequate consideration of the long sustained torture in this case. As I indicated in Ms. Vander Ark's testimony, there was a long period of months of various punishments, including bread with hot sauce. There's the hot sauce that apparently contains 2 of the hottest peppers that we have in the world. Wall sits for an individual who practically had no muscle left. Running up and down stairs, cleaning out a garage with no pants on, sleep deprivation in itself, putting alarms on him so he couldn't move or sleep, making him puke up food. There's bathroom timers, sleeping in the closet with a tarp down, which quite frankly might be considered animal abuse, but we have a human being here, making his hands over his head. And then at the end of his life, an 8-hour practically ice bath that killed him. So no, I don't think any of those things are adequately taken into consideration by the guidelines. And I don't think the guidelines, quite frankly, these guidelines don't justify Mr. Ferguson's actions. Mr. Ferguson, I think you are a product of your environment, but I don't believe you that you're sorry. I don't think you have empathy. I don't think you have any emotion whatsoever. And that's what scares the court. It really scares me. I think you're sorry that you're here. I think you're sorry you got caught. I don't think you wanted Tim to die either, like your mother, because you would get caught and you wouldn't torture him anymore. And believe me, I've tried to sit here and try to think, well, maybe Mr. Ferguson's not as bad as Mom. I think you're just as bad, if not worse. If not worse. Because you had a job. You could have, Mr. Johnson actually asked you, couldn't you have brought home a thing of food for him? You could have gone to a neighbor and said, hey, my mom's abusing him. You could have grabbed him and got him out of there. You could have done any number of things to stop this, and you chose not to. Your own brother. And this is where we're at. So, based on all that, it's a sentence of the court. You serve 30 years to 100 years, Michigan Department of Corrections. Credit for 592 days you've already served.
And I agree with that, Judge. This young man is a danger to society. He is in the making of becoming a serial killer, hurting animals, bullying. What he did with no kind of fight or objection to his brother. This is future serial killer material, and I stand by that. And yeah, But that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. And I'm sorry, I do have more Gypsy Rose videos coming up yet because there are some other topics I want to discuss. I'm going to be talking about the act and its inconsistencies with the real story, but it's based on a true story. No one said it was wholly true. So that's something we'll go over in another video. But that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to everyone later. Bye.